Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on the Alternate Current Radio Network and also at 21stCenturyWire.com. Thank you so much for joining us for this weekly omnibus news and analysis radio program brought to you here on ACR and 21 Wire. Again, I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. This is episode 504 of this weekly omnibus news and analysis radio program. Welcome back to the program, guys. Great to see you this week. We were off for a little while, but we're back again, and we're back for a great program today. We're going to have a great discussion about media censorship and a lot of important issues with our guests, who I'll introduce onto the stage in just a moment. And we'll also be able to catch up on a number of other big stories. There's so many things that have happened over the last couple of weeks, and I've been pretty much offline during that time. We'll catch up a little bit on that. But let me bring on to the stage right now our next guest. I'm very pleased he can join us, and that he has made the time to join us this week. His name is Larry Sanger, and he is the former founder of Wikipedia. He'll tell us his story, no doubt, again, but a lot of people will be familiar with Larry. He's been very vocal on the issue of free speech, on the issue of information liberation, decentralization, a lot of these important topics, and some things have come into the news of recent. We definitely want to get your opinion on Larry, among other things. A lot has gone on in the world of speech and information over the last couple of years. I know you've been on the forefront of this issue for your whole career, pretty much, and you continue to be pushing the envelope on it. I want to hear about your projects as well, which you're working on. We'll talk about those and show people where to find your work there. But first of all, welcome to the program, Larry.
Thanks, Patrick. It's good to be back.
And just for the people who aren't familiar with your story, Larry, tell us a little bit about how you got to this point in your career. Tell us about your early days of Wikipedia. That's a website everybody uses, everybody's familiar with, everybody knows, but there's a story behind there. Maybe you can give us a little bit of insight there to begin with, but go ahead.
Maybe a little bit. I got my PhD in philosophy, and I was finishing up the dissertation and proposing a website to acquaintances of mine, one of whom was Jimmy Wales, and he said that he had been he'd registered a domain name, newpedia.com. And then he wanted to start a free encyclopedia that would sort of do for encyclopedias what open source software does for software, something to be free for everyone to use and contribute to. So to make a long story short, I went to work. It was my job basically is to start the project, and it started slowly. And so we were looking around for new ideas about how to basically speed up the process. And a friend told me about wikis. And so I proposed, well, let's start a wiki. And so we did. And well, I guess the rest is history. It moved much faster than the previous incarnation. But unfortunately, it was starting at just about the time that the bottom fell out of the old late 1990s .com boom, for people who remember that. So boom was turning to bust just as Wikipedia was taking off. And so I kind of left. But then I completely, after I left, I completely cut ties with Wikipedia, and I've never really looked back except critically, because, well, a number of different problems. I guess I won't get into the problems that I had back then now.
So when Wikipedia started, did you have a different vision for this website, how it would interact with the world than what it has become now? Was there kind of a divergence in the vision of what you thought it could be as opposed to what it has become?
Yes. for one thing, back then I had no idea that it was going to get as huge as it is now and as quickly as it did. That was quite a shock to me. The other thing, though, that is a disappointment, really, is that my notion was that if we had people from all around the world contributing to an encyclopedia, then naturally you would want there to be reasonable ground rules where people of widely divergent opinions could work with each other. But actually and it works that way sort of more or less for the first several years. But then gradually the establishment, and I would say the establishment left, but mostly it's just the establishment, turned the screws, locked it down, and so that now only if you're able to cite certain kinds of establishment secondary sources, not primary sources, not tertiary sources, only if you're able to cite just items from those sources can you state the truth. If they don't have the truth, if they have a skewed version of the truth, then it's not going to be in Wikipedia. So that's a big problem with Wikipedia. They need to open up the sources that are available to be used. But that's just one example. Basically, it has become very biased.
And also, you talk about this. I know you've on social media, on Twitter, now X, you were really vocal about one of the moderator editor process, the community that was built, a community that you built the first version of it at Wikipedia, but then it kind of became something else. And you've talked about the danger that it could be gamed, that this type of crowdsource editing or communal editing can be gamed by certain agencies, be they PR agencies with enough money or intelligence services. Mm-hmm. And do you think this has happened with Wikipedia?
Definitely, it's happened. I think any online information source, especially if it's quite open, as Wikipedia is, at least nominally, is ripe for being gamed. And so, yeah, especially after it became really, really important, then I mean, why wouldn't various spy agencies and corporate PR, divisions and companies pour lots of money into making sure that the articles, which are taken as basically objective truth by a lot of people, why wouldn't they be controlled? Now, do we have a lot of direct evidence of this? Yes and no, actually. I mean, I have seen, I've actually talked to, I think 3 or 4 different CEOs of PR firms that specialize in writing articles for corporations. So that's a fact. We know that for sure. I think it was 2008, 2007, Virgil Griffith did, as part of his, I think it was his master's degree research, made something called the Wiki Scanner. You can look it up. And there were a lot of IP addresses that were editing. He systematically mapped all this stuff out, a lot of IP addresses from Langley, Virginia, the headquarters of the CIA. So as I've said to others, do you think they stopped? Why would they have stopped? So probably not. So we've got that evidence, but we don't know how it works on the inside. It's a black box, really. There is a lot of back channel communication going on in Wikipedia. Now, to a certain extent, there's a game played on the talk pages. So like if you go to a Wikipedia page about, I don't know, Barack Obama or Donald Trump or whatever, or Biden or Israel, you will see edit wars, essentially, except not really so much controversy anymore. There is some, for sure, but the people who are in control of the different pages and different portions of Wikipedia are able to shut down dissenting voices pretty quickly now. And again, we have some people crowing even on camera in speeches. There, a woman, I'm sorry I don't have the details, but someone could easily dig this up. It was just a few months ago, a woman came to light crowing about how they had organized a whole team of people to essentially use Wikipedia for activism. And that's essentially the way that she put it. And, you know, it's amazing to me that it's not supposed to be that way. It actually is supposed to. And this is what Jimmy Wales would say. If you were to ask him, he would say, this, of course, is what we're trying to do. We're trying to give the broad sense of all the different points of view, significant points of view on a topic. That's the way it's supposed to work. We should hold him to that. But he can't. You can find too many instances where there is an approved point of view and only that may be expressed. So it's no longer the neutral point of view at all.
And there's one particular controversy. I'll get your opinion on this one, but I'm sure you've read and seen plenty of this in the news. This is the Philip Cross phenomenon
Sure.
on Wikipedia. I'll just put
another bit of evidence. If you really add all of the evidence of like nefarious editing up that has accumulated over the years, there actually is a lot. Somebody could easily write a book, but go on.
But so the Philip Cross, the hundreds of thousands of edit entries here, all targeting, a lot of them anti-war websites, editors, journalists. So somewhat defamatory, I guess, and pejorative. You could say this was also kind of seen on the vaccine issue during COVID. A lot of the kind of anti-vaxxers, even Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he got an anti-vaxxer conspiracy theorist. That was the sort of strap line on his bio there. And then when someone went to change it, it got changed back. And you'd see this Philip Cross avatar appearing in all these entries. Almost seemed humanly impossible, Larry. I mean, granted, he's reported as being an autist, but even then, it's a pretty superhuman feat there for Philip Cross. Did you ever get a chance to kind of look into that one?
Well, there's so many examples of that general category of problem that I don't follow up on them all. It's a pattern. It's fairly straightforward to describe the pattern. When it becomes clear that a certain line, the narrative, as it is sometimes called, is being pushed by the mainstream media, that is the thing that is basically the only position that is allowed on Wikipedia. Now, perhaps they can find some counterexamples, and of course, it really depends on the kind of issue. But for the most part, let's just say that Wikipedia has no compunctions about taking controversial positions, even positions that later turn out to be just false, right? And in this way, it resembles the mainstream media. It's basically become another organ of the mainstream media. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah, it is kind of a natural evolution, isn't it? With any widely adopted platform, there is this sort of tectonic drift, isn't there, towards that phenomenon. So it's kind of, in a way, Larry, unavoidable when you get to a certain scale that's going to happen.
The weird thing is, though, that you wouldn't necessarily expect out of Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is supposed to be open. It's supposed to be available for anybody to contribute to, unlike like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or whatever, TikTok, those things, again, are, have this corporate moderating structure, which is, well, it was unveiled a little bit by Elon Musk in the case of Twitter, but exactly how it works it's still pretty mysterious, frankly, on a day-to-day basis. Wikipedia is supposed to be everything out in the open, but as I said, there's a lot of back channel dealings, and so that's what makes it possible for this for the same sort of narrative pushing to take place in what should be an open project.
And speaking of open projects, when Musk took over Twitter from Jack Dorsey and from the publicly traded Twitter went private, and there was this thing called the Twitter files where Elon Musk gave access to email tranches. Matt Taibbi, other Michael Schellenberger, independent journalist, got in there and went through it, and a lot of people were shocked by what they found in terms of backroom. You talk about backroom dealing between government directly, the DHS, the FBI, the NSA, the CIA. It was just a real revelation at the time. I mean, were you surprised when you saw the scope and the depth of all of that information, that all that was going on during the kind of Jack Dorsey regime, a regime where I was booted from that platform for a year and a half, along with others. But what were your impressions on when that broke?
I was surprised. I was mostly surprised in that they were willing to allow that much information out, and that earned Elon Musk quite a bit of cred in the free speech scene, I guess you could say. But I'm still not a 100% sold fan of his, because I actually think that the control continues on under the new regime. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss to a great extent. And well, that the same thing happened with Catherine Mayer. She just came out. She didn't. It was an unforced revelation. She said that, yeah, we were working hand in hand with government to fight misinformation about COVID. I mean, wow. So, the strange thing is, she's not supposed to do that as the CEO of Wikipedia. The executives aren't really supposed to have any editorial control over Wikipedia. And so she has two different kinds of questions to answer here. One is, what the heck is an open project doing, working with the government at all? I mean, that's the big one, of course. I mean, where do you get off thinking you can do that? Okay, and then the other is the internal question, which is of interest to Wikipedians throughout the years, which is, well, what exactly was the mechanism that she used? Does she have some people that she uses? Who are these people? That when she wants to actually push something, some instructions that she received from the government, are there a set of people that she calls upon to execute her will? I'd like to know.
Actually, funny you should ask, Larry. There is a sort of high table, as you were. There's a few of these organizations. You're familiar with a couple of the First Draft Coalition and these sort of consortiums that have people from the New York Times, the Washington Post, all the venerated legacy media outlets, heads of Wikipedia. They're also on these boards as well. They're sort of advisory boards. And I think they came into fruition in the aftermath of the Donald Trump shock and awe 2016 election, and under the clarion call, the 5-alarm fire for Western democracy, which was Russian interference and Russian disinformation. That's where they came from, Larry.
Oh,
And
I know, it's crazy. Yes, they had to have some scapegoat in order to start to put some sort of legitimate face on, all this talk about misinformation, and fighting misinformation. So
Catherine, you mentioned Catherine Mayer, former, I believe, head of Wikipedia, or that organization, the governing organization Wikipedia. Then she moved on to NPR, National Public Radio, and that sort of triggered a controversy itself. But I've got a video clip, one of the many video clips of her that are in circulation that people are kind of looking at right now. I'm going to play that video clip, Larry, and I want to get your thoughts and reactions to what she says here. So just listen.
I started by talking about the idea of free and open as some of our founding principles, sort of free and open source, coming from the idea of the open source community. Well, I have come to the opinion and the perspective that free and open was a way of looking at the world that was inherently limited relative to what we were trying to achieve. Free and open has the best of intentionality, but in the end, what free and open often ended up doing, and particularly in the case of Wikipedia, was really recapitulating many of the same power structures and dynamics that exist offline prior to the advent of the internet. And so what we ended up seeing was Wikipedia really rebuilt this idea of knowledge as a whole around what the Western canon. You see the exclusion of communities, of languages, because of the ways in which Wikipedia is based on reliable sources. The idea of a written tradition is something that is particular to the idea of a written tradition, which is particular to some cultures and not to others. The ways in which we ascribe notability often really comes from sort of this white male Westernized construct around who matters in societies and who is elevated in whose voices. And so some of these ideas of sort of this radical openness really did not end up with the intention, really did not end up living into the intentionality of what openness can be.
Wow. So there, she's really wearing her heart on her sleeve, ideologically speaking, Larry. But what's your reaction to that when you saw it?
It's almost as if she's trying to alienate and piss off libertarian defenders of Western civilization, like myself, and it's very strange. She talks like a true believer in wokeness, which is something I didn't know at all about Catherine Mayer. I mean, it doesn't surprise me terribly much, but I didn't know that. But yeah, it's amazing that she would actually admit, that she would come out and just say, yeah, I don't really believe in this free and open stuff. Because I mean, it's not an exaggeration. That's pretty much what she said. And she said that this methodology, freedom and openness, led to sort of a recapitulation of this, white male hegemonic Western,
patriarchal vertical power structures.
Exactly. So, she's been well indoctrinated, I must say. Her professors must be proud. So yeah, I mean, what
is she? That's not a unique position though, because Facebook, Jack Dorsey, and had a huge moderation operation at Twitter, Google, YouTube. But there's definitely a uniformity of thought at that level on big tech, right?
Just as there is at universities, especially among younger people, that universities have been radicalized since we went to college, basically, very much so. I mean, I thought that my professors were quite liberal back in the 80s, and then when I became a professor in the 2000s, I thought I could see that it was much worse. But now, I mean, they have no compunctions whatsoever about describing what they're doing as activism, and their students, like Catherine Mayer and people younger than her, so those would be the staff that do the moderation, and even the ones who set the policy to a great extent. Yeah, those people were trained by professors who think that the job of a responsible professional, academic or otherwise, now is to change the world, to remake the world for the socialist revolution, essentially. As near as I can tell, that seems to be what drives them.
So a tremendous amount of power concentrated in top decision-making positions in these organizations that basically control huge swaths of the information ecosystem that we interact and consume on a daily basis. Now, has there been a little course correction, or is there a little course correction going on here? And I've seen stories like this. I've been at NPR 25 years. Here's how we lost America. Yuri Berliner, veteran public radio editor there. It shows she's moved to this organization, NPR, and now they're getting hounded for basically not being objective. So what do you think? Is there something, is the system going into a correction mode at all, Larry?
I hope so. The correction, what you describe as a correction, is a backlash by older liberals and libertarians and conservatives against younger people who, again, have been radicalized, people, even the Democrats and the old liberals who are my age and a little younger and certainly older, we grew up, if we were in like academia or media, with an absolute solid agreement on free speech and on the open society. These are things that Republicans and Democrats agreed upon, and those are only the true leftists, and also I would add just people who were trained in the establishment and who are not terribly ideological. They just want to get ahead. There's a lot of people like that too. But nevertheless, only those people are able to switch gears. And so the old guard is now essentially, I think, naturally at odds with younger editors. So,
and we got this NPR is headline here from this piece by John Cass. Are federal tax dollars going for Marxist news, partisan censorship, pamphlets? Now, interesting article here. He basically says, will you pay me and subsidize me? He's ostensibly a conservative, I suppose. And he says, I have a very fringe minority views. I'm an extreme right winger or extreme conservative. And how would you feel about subsidizing my operation with public money? And this is what I'm going to cover. It's kind of a brilliantly written piece, although really extreme, but he kind of makes a good point. And so now there's an investigation. I think there's a House investigation, Larry. They're calling for a look at NPR's objectivity. So a little bit of a shakeup here at Washington.
I hope they're successful you know that Generation X, or sorry, the millennial generation is the first that where I would say majority of the people trained in universities are hostile to the ideals of free speech, for whom activism is just a way of life, and the way that institutions should be run. And sure, Congress can push back, and maybe they'll do a bit of a course correction, but in time, the millennials are going to come into power, and then what? I don't know.
Well, the millennials, the Gen Zers, they'll be in power in 15 or 20 years. So, and the shoes have on a little bit moved to the other foot in the last couple of weeks, Larry. So now as you say, the left-wing student activists are now basically being under the sort of hammer of a new piece of legislation, this anti-Semitism legislation that's being kind of rushed through the system in the House. So again, it's moving to the left is now becoming the target of maybe weaponizing the instruments of authority and government, which they used to point at conservatives just last week. So that's an interesting development. I think this could be positive in the long run, Larry, if both sides realize that we need to back off and focus on the First Amendment, for instance. What do you think?
I hope you're right. I mean, that would be nice. I'm a little bit skeptical, simply because things have been traveling in this direction, and the younger generation is, as I said, they have been indoctrinated. I mean, one of the most alarming things, frankly, about society today, apart as a specific application of the problem of education being utterly captured at all levels by the left, all right, is the fact that there has not been any inculcation of the American civic religion. In other words, you don't learn about the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. You cannot articulate any reasons for why somebody would think that free speech is a good thing. All these sorts of things, they should be taught, and they're not. And what we're about to see what happens when there is a whole generation of people who are simply not taught such things. And I have a feeling it's not going to end well. I hope I'm wrong. I hope you're right.
So when you're talking about civics, you're talking about, that sort of 13, 14 as a junior high into high school, we got absolutely inundated with civics, American history, how elections work, checks and balances in government. Sure. Those were drilled into us in American I went through public schools, so that I had the full program. But that stayed with me. That was kind of my ballast. And it remains my ballast as an adult when I participate in the political process. So that's where I will measure everything. Whether I've been in both parties, I've been a Democrat and Republican over the years. So, but I've always used that as my sort of compass, which is that system is the most important thing for both parties. And as I forgot who said this, maybe it was Thomas Jefferson, that an eagle needs two wings to fly. It needs a right and a left. And so I'm not sure if that was him or not, but some famous American political said that, but I always remembered that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I mean, the joys and wonders of the two-party system, for example, that isn't explained. And I've been reading. I homeschool my boys, and I've been reading the Constitution and explaining the Constitution in depth, like clause by clause, and so forth. And my guys are pretty well educated, I suppose, for their age. Not very well educated. But yeah, that's kind of shocked at what they didn't understand. Of course, that's my fault. But they, this is something that I think parents are going to have to do with their children if they don't get it from schools. Just take a meal, read through the Constitution at meal times. That's what I do. So.
So back to Wikipedia. So you envision a better way of performing the job of what Wikipedia was meant to do, and you've got a new project, the Encyclosphere,
Yes.
if I pronounced that correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And this is part of your foundation. I know this is a big part of your work right now, Larry. But how is this different fundamentally from Wikipedia, and does it have great scalability? What is the utility, and what's the difference between this and Wikipedia?
All right. So what is it? What is the difference? And what is essentially the benefit and the scalability? Fine. So the Encyclosphere is you could describe it as a collection of all the encyclopedias. So in the same way that the blogosphere is a collection of all the blogs, the Encyclosphere is a collection of all the encyclopedias. We have a representation of about 66 encyclopedias now. So that is our window into the Encyclosphere, and spread across two different collections of encyclopedias, EncycloSearch and EncycloReader. They act as meta search engines, but also readers for the free encyclopedia articles. The need that it fulfills is the preservation of knowledge, and simply by putting everything under one umbrella, not to say under one leadership, because this is just a way of aggregating knowledge, essentially trying to make a network of what already exists, connecting together knowledge in many different forms, not imposing any requirements on anyone, but just simply gathering it together. The idea is that we would like to be able to archive in a permanent, digitally signed fashion information from many different sources, so that we don't have to use Wikipedia. I actually think the thing that there is the greatest need for is articles in the long tail, and we can address that. And by the long tail, that's this old internet theory jargon. It's kind of old now, but the idea is that most people, most of the time, search for a relatively small set of terms. But in fact, there's another set, what's called a long tail, if you will, popularity of different searches, a long tail of searches that are less popular, but nevertheless explain why Wikipedia is as popular as it is, because it's got articles on all of that stuff too, and really long articles on the popular topics. But we need to have articles of that sort from other sources. So what I'm trying to do is to persuade authors to write those articles and to promote the work of in other encyclopedias, essentially, and as I say, to serve as an archive. This is going to be, I think, increasingly important, especially if the files are digitally signed in the age of AI, when people start asking, has this been edited recently? How can we know what it said back in the day? So another thing that we're doing is we're actually digitizing and bringing more fully online the individual articles from old public domain encyclopedias. And eventually, what I'd like to do is to make an AI front end for all of the encyclopedias, but that's That is hard. That is a very hard problem to solve. That requires a lot of funding, and we are in need of funding actually at this point. But there's other things too. Wouldn't it be cool if you could take all of the oldest, public domain encyclopedias, put them, train an AI based on them, and then have a conversation with an AI that was trained on information older than the 20th century? What would it be like?
That brings up an interesting point. Okay, so with the current Wikipedia, the wiki system, it's kind of a mishmash. You've got the editors changing things in real time. You've got all of these web articles and digital articles that are pinged to the bottom of their references and so forth. But is there a need, in your opinion, for more of a canon when it comes to certain types of knowledge, like something that meets some kind of a consensus standard in certain subject areas? What's the value of this? Because this is something that they're really struggling with in education. From the teachers I've spoken with, the way that the kids interact with information now is totally different, and also the way teachers are presenting it is different as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the words standard and canon mean different things in different domains. So when we talk about knowledge standards, in our name, Knowledge Standards Foundation, we're actually talking about digital standards, technical standards. When you're talking about a canon of things to study, or state standards in the domain of education, and you mean something entirely different. And I'm in favor of that to a certain extent anyway. At least, let's put it this way. I think that standards, I think that there are such things as classics, that they need to be read, and that it would be nice if they were part of the standards, if we must have standards. On the general sort of philosophical question, whether what is required to be learned by all citizens, whether that should be standardized, I'm not sure what I think about that. But that's not really the political question before us, because that's been decided. Yes, there are going to be state standards. And so I would agree with you, and I think it's actually very important that there is a baseline of knowledge that's extremely important that we have in common. So I agree strongly with, I don't know if I have the book here on my shelf in front of me, but there is an old professor of English, maybe you remember his name, I can't recall his name, who defended the idea of basic knowledge that all of us should be inculcated with. I teach my kids from the great books. They've gone through them fairly slowly, it's. I think it teaches kids how to think, which is probably why we're not doing it. I mean, that's probably why society has sort of given up on that as an ideal, because our fearless leaders don't really want people who think. They certainly don't pass policies that have that as an aim.
Yeah, when I went back to school, I went back late as a student to do my master's degree. I was in my late 40s, you could say, and I was very cocky. I thought I knew everything about politics and the world. So I thought, what are these teachers going to tell me? I've been on the ground in the Middle East and whatever. And I had to read a lot. I mean, I was made to read things that I would never have touched before, things I didn't agree with as well. But that intense period of 12 months, 18 months, where I was doing that reading, years later, Larry, I'm still drawing off that.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I can't tell people. There's something about books as well that being able to the focus that's required when you have a book in your hand, as opposed to reading digitally when you have all the distractions around you. So it's hard.
Let me show you something, if I may.
Sure.
So I am putting all of Project Gutenberg on these things, on 128 gig flash drives. I'm using ChatGPT-4. The GPT and I are working on software for searching and reading this. It should be ready in a few weeks. And people who donate to the Knowledge Standards Foundation will get one of these 70,000 books on removable media that cannot be censored because you'll have the media with the books on it. And that's the sort of thing that I think has to exist. We have to start thinking in those terms. We need to start thinking in terms of preserving knowledge in many copies that cannot be shut down. Kind of like guns. You know, there's so many guns that it would be really, really hard for for a regime to actually go and take them all away, right? It's not going to happen. And if you've got many, many different copies of the essential knowledge that we should all have, then it's never going to be taken away.
Yeah, and so from that USB stick that you have there, you could go to print with that if you so choose. So that was the big fear with Wikipedia and these types of social media archiving, is that you could have this real-time censorship where you could actually alter history exactly as George Orwell described it in 1984. The party can just go in and say that's no longer true. Now this is the history, and then it will change next week again. And we're kind of seeing that with a lot of arbitrary weaponization of language and information. So I like your brick and mortar thinking. It's funny, Larry, that outside the box thinking would be construed by some people as being a Luddite. You're talking about hard copies, and but it is practical. You know, we can do that with everything, really. I mean, we don't have to be networked on the phones the way that we use our cell phones, the way the networks are configured, our servers, our internet domain system. There's lots of different.
I'll show you another example. Another example is right down here. You see the black box right here.
Yep.
That is where about half of the apps that I use on my phone are run from. So I don't have Dropbox at all. I got rid of it entirely, right? So like my photos are all in this photo app, which runs from there. And my audio, like I've digitized a lot of my old CDs and stuff, so that's there. And so forth. So self-hosting is also a thing, and it needs to get bigger. So, and the name for the kind of box that people are looking into, like buying one for themselves, hosting their own stuff, it's a NAS, N-A-S. That's what it is. Network attached storage.
NAS drive. So video people who work in film, they're familiar with that kind of equipment because they use it. So you're saying that you can basically take control of the whole thing and be your own host, basically, right?
It's hard to do email, and it's hard to do the social media so far, but we're working on ways of decentralizing that too. But there, the problem is the network effects that are required in order for a social media system to become competitive with the giant platforms. So
who do you see right now as the pioneers? There's a lot going on, Web3 and changes in DNS. approaches and things like that. So where do you see who's pushing the envelope right now? Who are the sort of groups or the collectives and persons, innovators that you're kind of noticing that looks like they're showing some promise?
I wish I could give you a name of a group that jumps out. I would like to put in a good word for FUTO, based in Austin, FUTO.org. They were still very grateful to the hundreds of thousands that they've given to the Knowledge Standards Foundation. And they also they're working on some apps of their own. But I think the thing that's really going to make a difference in the long run is actual files on servers that are networked together independently of corporations. And that is hard to do. Generally speaking, when a system like Blue Sky, for example, which is Jack Dorsey's open Twitter alternative, essentially, I don't know that that's going to take off. And the fact that Jack Dorsey started it kind of means that it's probably not, trustworthy anyway. No, I'm sorry, I don't have good news on that front. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of organizations that are having a go. Part of the problem, actually, to be quite honest, is that there are too many different organizations that are proposing many different standards, which is an interesting fact in itself, actually. And what that means is that the people who are passionately in favor of freedom and openness, all the things that Catherine Mayer doesn't like, they are spread out across many different projects. What there desperately needs to be are unifying standards. But, as they say, we need, as the meme, according to the meme, you could probably find it, there needs to be one unifying standard for all of these standards. It becomes a new standard, that's all. Yeah. It's a hard problem. If it weren't a hard problem, it would have been solved.
What about AI? Got a couple minutes left. You mentioned ChatGPT. You've employed it as an agent under your command. So, what's your experience been like so far with the new sort of complex language bots? I think that for now, anyway, I would say they are forces for good. They're labor multipliers for developers and even for editors. Frankly, I actually use it for two different purposes myself. I use it to write code, and I'm writing a book. So I'll actually feed it a few pages at a time and have it give feedback. And depending, it can be very, very useful. It's quite amazing, though. I'm just speaking about my own experience, and obviously the fact that the latest engines can create songs from scratch and videos that are photorealistic is just utterly mind-blowing, obviously. I'm not really sure what to say about that, except that what it really means is going forward, there's going to be a whole new layer of technology
that developers are going to have to be really solid on, and that is cryptography and digital signing. Because basically information that is put out onto the internet before too long is all going to have to be digitally signed, right? And that then raises the whole issue of, who owns the digital identities that are used to do the signing. See, the point of a digital signature, I should explain that. The point of a digital signature is to say that this file came from this public identity somewhere. Okay, so you can show that only that identity on Sanger's server could have produced this signature, which is attached to a file. And it's a way of proving that that particular file, or an email, because email uses the same technology, that bit of information came from a particular source. Now, if you can trust that a particular identity is that of a real human being, then you have a way of showing that some content has its source with that human being. And going forward, I have a bad feeling that there's going to be the internet is going to change a lot, because it's going to be flooded with AI generated crap. I mean, it's already the case, right? Auto-generated search results, doing Google search results is already, it's like, why bother anymore, practically? That's because half of the results, especially when you drill down very far on certain topics, they are just auto-generated garbage.
I can tell you in the financial world, this is a problem. You've got AI generating financial articles based on reading market signals, which are then feeding into black box trading algorithms that are basically moving markets. So it's like one sort of internal feedback loop that's all pretty much all algorithm generated. So you could have the same problem in the literary or cultural information space. That's kind of what you're alluding to there, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes and no. I think it's broader. The whole, basically, every human production online, essentially, if they can do difficult programming and video, right? Which they're not quite there yet, right? So, like, give it a few years, but that's it. In a few years, that's what we will be faced with. So that it will, I mean, you will be able to wonder if there is a dead internet, and that, like, it's all just bots talking to bots, right? And what I'm saying is, what's going to happen going forward is there will be these new services where everything that comes out in the system has been digitally signed. So it can be proven that it came from a human being, right? Yes, but then the big question is, who owns the digital identities that are associated with the digital signatures? And you don't want it to be Microsoft. You don't want it to be the government. You don't want it to be Google. You want to own it yourself. That's the bottom line. And this actually is one of the reasons why I say you guys got to get out there and buy your own NASs and buy your own domains, register your own email addresses. Like my email is larry@sanger.io. So it's my name, basically. And don't use Gmail. Just take the time. You know, this is a meaningful way you can strike a blow for liberty, essentially.
No, these are all first good practical things, and it's never been easier to do these things, Larry. The equipment and the tools are there. They're relatively inexpensive, and the know-how's there. You can basically self-teach yourself how to do all these things just through a few YouTube videos,
or just hire a geek to set up the NAS for you. It might cost an extra $100 or $200. It's not hard for the geek. So
yep. And then security, there's options there. There's ways of cloaking and kind of concealing your identity online through various virtual networks and so forth. So there's a lot of options there. So yeah, I'm also positive on that front, Larry. I also see cryptocurrency as a kind of an interesting development in recent years that's kind of liberated a lot of people in that financial networks as well. It's not without its problems, of course. Many problems, but just generally, I think I see a lot of innovation going in those directions, a lot of energy, and a lot of smart people working in those spaces, but they're motivated by problem solving. And I've had a chance to spend time and meet more of them in the last year or so, and I'm really impressed with some of the people that are working in these spaces.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
yes, me too. Yes. I've been talking to a lot of those sorts of people. Worked for a crypto company before, but I actually think it's old technology. The whole idea of key pair cryptography. Basically, it proves that you are in control of information, that it came from you. That basic principle is basically lost when all of your data is rather associated with a platform and an account on a platform that you can log into, but you don't really own. Mm-hmm. So,
and also solves that cancel. In a way, it's moving towards solving that cancel culture problem as well with centralized platforms. That's maybe not an issue when you're talking about the decentralized world that you're trying to build. You and others are trying to build, Larry. So
rebuild. That's what the internet was, decentralized in the beginning, and it's been locked down, and the decentralized nature of the internet has been basically destroyed in just the last 15 to 20 years. That's it.
Yeah, it's happened very quickly. So hopefully the solutions will present themselves and people will take advantage of what's out there. But Larry Sanger, former founder of Wikipedia, the Knowledge Standards Foundation, Encyclosphere is the big project with your foundation. So if you want more information about that, folks, the links are down below the video as well. Follow Larry on X, formerly known as Twitter. And what are some of the platforms where you are?
It's mostly Twitter these days and larrysanger.org. I really do want to start blogging more and maybe putting some more videos out there. So where I'm on YouTube, but I'm going to try to push them also to BitChute, which I support.
And so definitely, folks, you definitely keep an eye on what Larry is innovating, and you're going to find out where this thing is headed, known as the internet, the decentralized internet, returning to its source. Hopefully, yeah. That's the idea. But Larry, thank you so much for joining us on the Sunday Wire. It's been an absolutely fascinating conversation, and stay in touch. And do keep us abreast of any projects that you're working on as well. We're very happy to promote those.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. That is Larry Sanger. Listen, we're going to take a break with the network, but when we come back, we're going to have a little bit of a wrap up in the final segment of Overdrive. A few things I want to share with you guys about my recent experience, and also something that we published at 21stcenturywire.com, which is, I think, an extraordinary interview, and it's going to move the dial, I think, on the conversation regarding Ukraine, and also the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage as well. Some new developments there. Stick around. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Genocide is never justified. There ain't no reason, 'cause human beings are more than just a kind, defined by race or religion. 'Cause we all have souls and a mission here on earth. Only God knows why. You can't decide their death, 'cause you weren't here for their birth, or their first laugh or cry. Don't let the children die. Don't let the children die. Sisters and brothers, we know it's wrong when we see their fathers cry with their mothers. Genocide is never justified. There ain't no reason, 'cause human beings are more than just a kind, defined by race or religion. 'Cause we all have souls and a mission here on earth. Only God knows why. You can't decide their death, 'cause you weren't here for their birth, or their first laugh or cry. Don't let the children die. Don't let the children die. Sisters and brothers, we know it's wrong when we see their fathers cry with their mothers. Don't let the children die. Don't let the children die. Sisters and brothers, we know it's wrong when we see their fathers cry with their mothers.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We are streaming out live on the Alternate Current Radio Network and also 21st Century Wire Thank you so much for rejoining us on this live broadcast. Again, this is episode 504 of this weekly Omnibus News and Analysis radio program, TV program as well. We're streaming out on Rumble, X, YouTube, still on YouTube. Amazingly, that in itself is a miracle. And also, where else are we? Facebook. Zuckerberg's allowing us to broadcast to 5 or 6 people on Facebook. So thank you, Mark, and the Atlantic Council for still allowing our account to be active, even though you've absolutely throttled our reach to basically a handful of people. But that's what they do to certain media platforms and certain media outlets. So that's, anyway, we keep it alive in the hope that maybe one day, like as Larry Sanger was saying, positive view of the future, that maybe there might be a change of management or a change of politics in the United States, where they'll start allowing a little more of a reasonable editorial policy when it comes to censorship at some of these big tech platforms like YouTube, Facebook. X is somewhat free, although I do share a little bit of Larry's skepticism about the algorithm and what sort of content it's throttling and favoring on X, formerly known as Twitter. That remains to be seen. But nonetheless, we're there. And on the audio streams, we've been achieving great growth on audio. So that's been amazing. Spotify, we're picking up a lot of subscribers on these different platforms. So they do appreciate the content they're getting there. And yeah, we'll also probably be putting video up as well on Spotify, as well as a couple of the other platforms. Some of the really good audio platforms like Podbean, Spotify, they're also getting into video as well. So that option is open, has been for a while. Not everybody takes advantage of it because it's not your obvious choice. But anyway, for all you guys who subscribe to us on these different platforms, thank you very much. Really appreciate your audience and your listenership, your viewership, and also the people who've donated to this platform during our fundraisers. Winter fundraiser was pretty successful. A lot of people donated, and if you really want to help us on a rolling basis, subscribe and become a member at 21wire.tv. That's one way you can help us going forward. We'll put some information on that just along the bottom of the program there. We'll just a little bit of information there. Yeah, support our work. The winter fundraising drive's over, but the links are still on our website. So again, anything you can help us with, it's greatly appreciated. We've upgraded a lot of our content. And I also wanted to just point people to the website, 21st Century Wire. I recently had an opportunity to do an interview with a former Ukrainian parliamentarian. His name is Andrei Derkash. And I actually did that interview in Minsk, the capital of Belarus, which is an amazing city. Some of you are familiar, that name sounds familiar. This is where the peace process was launched after 2014 with Ukraine to try to come to some kind of a resolution, some kind of a negotiated settlement to prevent the very war that ended up happening, the Minsk peace process. And it's been a great education to learn more about how that failed. That's one of the things that it's a long story that I'm chasing across different countries and different experts as well. Also, just understanding a little bit about some of these countries and what they endured during the Second World War. Belarus's story is unbelievable. We're coming up to the anniversary of the liberation of Belarus from Nazi occupation in 1945. So this is a tremendous untold story in the West. And I know people, especially in America, they don't like to give any credit for the victory in the Second World War to any of the Eastern European countries, much less the Soviet Union and the Red Army. But the facts are the facts. They broke the back of the Third Reich and the Nazi war machine. It was the Russians, and it was specifically Belarus really inflicted incredible damage and had a chance to see some of the historical sites. It's very emotional, very harrowing, the stories and the history there. They went through a lot, and a lot more was endured directly in terms of the attack on that country, the amount of concentration camps, the amount of people that died in Belarus. We're talking about 2.3 million in a period of 3 years, maybe a little less than 3 years. These are just unbelievable numbers. And you can check the history books, ladies and gentlemen. But I can tell you that was quite an emotional thing. But the more important subject in terms of what's in the news today, what story is breaking, is the interview with Andrei Derkach, which is at 21stcenturywire.com. It's got a lot of detail in it. And we talk about how Ukraine came to the point where it's at in history right now. And this is an insider perspective. Andrei Derkach, very experienced politician, has an incredible career in politics in Ukraine. Also, as an investigator, investigator into embezzlement, financial crimes, government auditing, and so forth. Experience in the energy sector there as well. But really a front row seat in the dissolution and the sort of breakdown politically and economically of Ukraine, the corruption, all of that is detailed in our interview. It's a written interview. It's up at 21stcenturywire.com, and we've gotten tremendous feedback so far. I think it's a really important thing to put on the record. So it just gives a lot of new information, also a lot of information that's already out in the public domain, but it's put into context. One of those is the Nord Stream pipeline. Now, when the terrorist attack hit Moscow, Crocus City Hall, that was not so long ago, just over a month ago. I happened to be in Moscow when that happened. That was quite a shock. I have covered terrorist attacks in other countries, especially in the Middle East. And to do that in a country like Russia is not something you expect to do. It's not the place where you expect to have these things happen. But this set off a trigger of a series of events. One of them is a special investigative committee was formed by the Russian Federation. Very quickly have gotten to the bottom of the organization, the planning, and the financing of terrorist attacks and terrorist activities directed at Russia and as are related to the Ukraine situation. And one of the interesting revelations there, and this is also down to the work of Andrei Derkach, is the Nord Stream pipeline. Okay, and read closely this article. And the thing that's been in the Western press about the West, they had all these different conspiracy theories after the Nord Stream pipeline blew. The first thing was, of course, surprise, surprise, they blamed Russia for blowing up its own pipeline. Disingenuous, you might laugh, but that's the default position for the West anyway. That was expected. Next up on deck was some other sort of conspiracy theory. They said, oh, it's a rogue cell of Ukrainian agents. So they threw Zelensky and Kiev under the bus. So, because that's an act of war against Germany as well as Russia. It's a joint project, the Nord Stream pipelines. And when you noticed when they threw Ukraine under the bus with this conspiracy theory, and later they planted some reports in the German, Polish press about a yacht being a sailboat being the Andromeda being rented, and so forth. It was all very perfectly scripted. Of course, we were skeptical from the off on that, but they constructed the story. There was no denial or pushback or no protest coming from Kiev. I thought that was quite weird, to say the least, because normally they'd be like, oh, we didn't do it. So they didn't do that. So something was not right with this. It's not something that you want to have pinned on you for various legal reasons, and also just politically, it's going to create problems within NATO, because all these NATO states that are supporting the Ukrainian proxy war doesn't make sense to the voters in Germany, just saying. So anyway, the story develops a little bit. Then this story surfaces later about this super soldier crack team of expert Ukrainian divers. And they marry that up with the sailboat in Poland and place them near the scene of the crime. Money flows are being exposed and tracked and so forth. And it was all very interesting and a nearly perfect kind of subplot. But there's only one problem. It's turned out to be a red herring, a very expensive red herring, a very well-financed and very and sophisticated constructed red herring. What would be the point of that? It doesn't take a genius to figure it out. Think of the ramifications of the sabotage of Nord Stream pipelines 1 and 2. Think about this is historic. Never before have we seen infrastructure attacked, European infrastructure attacked in this way. And so by diverting the blame, you need a really well-constructed backstory. And this looks like that's what happened, including money men and everything. Anyway, there's some details of this at 21st Century Wire in the Durkash interview. I encourage people to go read it. This is what he is presenting, is what he's saying. He's somebody who ostensibly, you could say, would be in the know, and brings receipts for these accusations as well. So is that what happened? This is just the beginning of the story. I think this story is probably going to continue to develop over the coming weeks and months, and we'll be there to share what we understand, what we see, the connections that we're making. Everything that we have access to is in the public domain. All we're doing is grabbing it, collating it, and trying to make some sense of it. That's all. There's nothing sub rosa, as they say, in this story. But what is interesting is the extent and the involvement that we now see and know of U.S. involvement in Ukrainian government affairs, in the intelligence, in the defense intelligence sector, and also the way the cash is flowing into that country and through various programs like USAID is being plundered and money's being embezzled. You have fake grant programs about, judicial reform, democratic reform. All of this stuff is a gravy train in Ukraine. There's a lot of people using it as an ATM machine, courtesy of Uncle Sam and the public purse, of course. Where else? But there's all sorts of interesting scams. A lot of this is detailed in this interview. So again, I'm going to tell people, please go read it. This was a fascinating opportunity to be able to talk at length with somebody with that much inside knowledge and just be able to put that on paper. Those are his words. That's the information. You can check it. A lot of this stuff does check out with Ukrainian media and press. So everything seems to be traceable and real. The question is, now that it's public, now that everybody knows a lot of these things and has known them for a long time, even Rudy Giuliani was deployed by President Trump to Ukraine, and all of this stuff he knew, and he deposed Viktor Shokin, the prosecutor general at the time in Ukraine. There was the tapes that were released from the president of Ukraine's office with Biden and Poroshenko, basically colluding to fire the Ukrainian prosecutor who was investigating Burisma while Biden's son Hunter was on the board. I mean, you don't need much more evidence than this. It's all been out there in the public domain, but not all of it's been acted upon. There's a lot of political fortunes and legacies and reputations that are tied to this specific story. And I'm going to call it the sort of commandeering and abusing of the country of Ukraine at the behest of the United States and its allies for a very long time. This didn't just start after the Maidan. This predates. It goes right way back to the previous 2 presidential administrations before that, if not longer, in Ukraine. In the interview, go all the way back to 1991. So it just gives you a little bit more perspective. And again, we appreciate everybody who supported 21 Wire. We're working on more content as well, more interesting interviews, a few groundbreaking interviews as well. We think that this is one of those. And also not just that, audio, video, written. There's lots of different ways that we're going to bring this information to our audiences. So again, we appreciate you guys and what you've been able to do for us. And we hope that, we hope we can continue doing it. So that's all I want to share with you in the final segment of Overdrive. And again, a big thank you to Larry Sanger, our guest in the first hour. Larry's a former founder of Wikipedia, sharing his thoughts, his disappointments of the past with that organization, but also his positive outlook for the future of a decentralized internet, bringing it back to what it should have been. I think that's the message that came through with our conversation with Larry Sanger today. Certainly that's what I take from that. And I hope that you took something similarly positive from that incredible discussion we just had. So again, big thank you to Larry. Big thank you to you guys for tuning in. We'll hope to see you guys. We're going to hopefully have an interesting lineup for you this week. I'll see you guys on TNT Monday to Friday. I was out for a couple of weeks, one because I was traveling, the other because I was recovering from an injury, which I think, well, hopefully I'm in the process of healing up. But yeah, I don't want to get into too much other detail than that. Suffice to say, it's great to be back. Yeah, really appreciate you guys and a lot of the great comments and messages that we've gotten over the last couple of weeks while we've been sort of out of action. And I want to give a big thank you as well. Again, I thanked him on Friday on TNT, but Basil Valentine sat in for me for a couple of days this past week. That was amazing. He did an incredible job. He is the political editor of TNT, but he famously is the roving correspondent for culture and sport here at the Sunday Wire for over 10 years. Basil Valentine has been a great part of our team, and we really love his outlook and his commentary, his sense of humor, and also his betting advice as the elections are coming up. He's going to tell us who's in the market for the vice presidential spot for Donald Trump, who might replace Joe Biden if he bows out at the convention, which he just might. That's what Roger Stone said. It's very possible. And we spoke to him recently. Basil also had a really good segment with him last week on TNT. Anyway, we're going to have a great lineup for you at TNT. We've already got a few fantastic guests already booked in, and it looks like it's going to be a powerful week. Not only that, next Sunday Wire, I'm pretty sure we're going to have another blockbuster, amazing conversation with a very special guest on this time slot next weekend. So again, thank you guys. Thank you for all your support. Thank you for tuning in. Hello to everybody on the various platforms. And I will see you guys later. Take care. This is Patrick Henningsen signing out. All the best.
Supervised contact, they watch our every move. They examine our togetherness like we've got something to prove. Oh, I've looked behind your eyes, I've seen the sadness you hide. I've looked into your eyes, I've seen the tears that you've cried. No, I won't get used to these chains. No, I won't get used to these chains. In the legal arena, upset theaters are staged. She moves in circles, her cruel games cause delays. From the questions you ask me, like why can't you come home tonight? From the moment you hold me, it's the shortest hour of my life. No, I won't get used to these chains. I wanna tell you They say I've got to be careful with what I say. Their conspiracy of silence. They think the truth will lead you astray. They say that they're here for you, but they never listen to what you say. They've built walls between us. I will walk through walls to break these chains. No, I won't get used to these chains. No, I won't get used to these chains.